Welcome to second part of chapter 1. In previous video we were discussing the scoping form and different elements of the scoping form. We have looked through the scoping form and in this video we will look at the fine details that are written within the manual about the scoping form. So in the first video the scoping form we were trying to fill out at a higher level, and then in this video we will look at some more details that are provided within the manual which will help us in filling up the scoping form. So chapter 1 we will cover in the chapter 1 in this video is primarily focused on scoping and kind of help with fee, timeline and scoping at the initial stage on the tools selections. And there are subsequent chapters which goes into further details of how to use that tools and what are the parameters we need to use and what are the methodology we need to follow in using those tools. So we will look at all the technical details in further chapters and in this video, and we will finish up chapter 1 and focus on different elements that needs to be included at the very beginning of the project when we are deciding the scope of the project. So the first item in this chapter is the scoping meeting deliverables. Before the scoping meeting, the deliverable is the scoping form which we have just discussed, and filled out scoping form so that the scoping form can be agreed upon during the meeting and finalized after the meeting. During the meeting we can discuss the agenda items, and these are the typical agenda items which is recommended by manual for the traffic work. So traditionally traffic is not the pillar of the work. Let's say we are working on a project and the work is of 2 million contract, then the traffic would usually be 100k to 200k. So in majority of the projects traffic is a small step in a bigger project. So during the scoping meetings it's not been the focus of the meeting for most of the part. Traditionally we just write the scope that is agreed upon by the PM, and the similar scopes are repeated for different projects. So having a scoping meeting just for the traffic and safety is a big step forward for TxDOT project in my personal opinion. Traditionally majority of project has been focused on roadway design, and the traffic and safety work is traditionally just written within the scope and agreed upon rather than having an active discussion at the beginning of project. So I believe that the quality of traffic and safety work will go up by including the discussion of traffic operation and safety at the beginning of project, apart from just writing it within the scope and contract. So this preparing a scoping meeting and having an actual meeting rather than just emails would be a bigger improvement, and would definitely reflect in the quality of deliverables that will be done as a part of future TxDOT projects. So having a scoping meeting and having a face-to-face meeting with the scoping form is a step forward in the field of traffic operations, especially in Texas. So these are different elements that are included in the scoping form. So introduction and project description. Introduction of project include personals that are involved in the project, like we saw in the scoping form. So this would be our TxDOT PM and project PM from consultant side. Also, if there are other stakeholders like FSWA, then we can mention the key stakeholders there. It includes the TxDOT project manager for performing organization, which is consultants, and other TxDOT group, divisions and district. The FSWA may be involved in the process if the project involves an interstate. Specific key personnel on the specify this key personnel on the scoping form, which was the first element on the scoping form we saw in the previous video. So the project description serves as a defining set of characteristics that are neither descriptive or serve to guide the analysis methodologies. So project description serves as a defining set of characteristics that are either descriptive or serve to guide the analysis. So by either descriptive, I believe it meant to say whether it's a planning project or a schematic project or PSNE project, or to serve the guide analysis methodology, or whether it's an operational project or safety driven project. So either is one of the classification that are already defined within the TxDOT framework, which are 3 different planning projects like corridor, feasibility, and route studies. Those are planning projects. Beyond that, there is preliminary schematic, then schematic, advanced schematic, PSNE, or it can be, or if it's a specific project, for example, it's a traffic operations related project or safety related project, then that's the second part. The characteristic and project description include project name and CSJs. Every project has one or more CSJs. Locations, project overview, analysis and level of detail, scope of work, study limits, geographical limits. There is a I believe either in appendix or the report there is a picture on how the limits needs to be presented on single page. So on single page we can represent the corridor and the crossing street and the limit on the crossing street. I believe there is a picture within the report or appendix we will see soon. Then analysis time periods, analysis year, background factor that may influence the project, and project schedule. So we have looked at all these elements when we were discussing the scoping form. While some of the project descriptors are self-explanatory, more detailed information on some of the characteristics are provided in further sections. So first one is project overview. The project overview section briefly describes basic elements of the project such as analysis type and facility type. Include other descriptive information about the project in the project overview section. See table 1-2 or 1-2 for an example on how to fill out this section. So there is an table, I believe 1-2. Let me look for it. So 1-1 is one page before it. This is the study limit picture I was mentioning. So this is the spatial limit map which shows the corridor and the cross street limits and the intersections that are included. This is the scoping form. This is the table that is mentioned. So 1-2 is this table is same as the scoping form we looked at. So table 1-2 is a part of the scoping form we already looked at. Project development stage. That's the next section. The project development stage describes the position of project in its life cycle. There are 3 main project development stage. Like I mentioned during in previous video that there are 3 main project development stage. One is planning stage, one is preliminary schematic, which is also should be called just schematics. Actually schematic is the schematic at this level. This is the schematic. So instead of saying, I think it's very confusing when it says preliminary schematic, because there are some schematic that are developed as a part of planning project, and those are actually called preliminary schematic. I think it's better to use the word just schematic, because at this level there is 30%, 60% and 90% and final. So that's the advanced schematic. So even in the planning there are something called conceptual schematic that are developed. I believe the preliminary schematic word should be replaced with just the schematic, because several times preliminary schematics is also a part of planning projects. So for example, several feasibility studies include preliminary schematics. So I'll try to send an email to our traffic division to kind of as a suggestion to change the preliminary schematic to schematic, because schematic goes from 30%, 60%, 90% to 100%, which is called as we can call it advanced schematic. And then PSNE. So after schematic is done, usually after planning is done, usually schematic is done as a part of new contract, and usually a different consultant does it. And then the PSNE is also done as a part of new contract. So these are three different contracts. So at PSNE level, we take the schematic and we go and do the detail putting the markings. So in the part of PSNE, we have we design intersection controllers, intersection layout, or call intersection design, ITS design, pavement marking, and roadway design, pavement marking, drainage, and all the further details, pavement marking, drainage, and all the details that are needed to be there before construction. And the end stage, when all the project details plans are developed, so that's under PSNE, and after PSNE comes the construction. So the project development stage can be considered multi-stage if it includes a combination of planning, preliminary schematic, and final or approved PSNE. The project development stage is one factor to determine which analysis tool will be used for the project. For more information about the project development stage, I'll go to chapter 4 section 2, which we will look later on. Then the next section is to discuss the level of details. Level of details is different than project development stage and describes the detail necessary to complete an analysis. The analysis tools are often categorized into varying level of details. We have discussed this level of details in chapter 1 of our book series, not in the manual, but chapter 1 of our book, and what are different tools that are there to do different levels of analysis, and pros and cons of different level of analysis. So the first one is sketch level tools, then mesoscopic tools, which are primarily static or deterministic tools, and then microscopic simulations. For more detail, please refer to one of our video series on chapter 1 on the chapter 1, not from the manual but from the video series we have. Then the next section we have is before going to next section, here are some safety related tools. So analysis tool typically used in safety related project includes TxDOT safety scoring tool, which are available on TxDOT website. Safety performance for intersection control evaluation SPICE tool. These are available by FSWA, and several DOTs have changed it to suit their local conditions. So safety is like we have discussed in chapter 4 of the video series, where we talk about predictive analysis and stuff. That is, safety is most of the safety softwares and analysis procedures are statistical model, which depends on the data we feed in, or the models which are developed based on the safety data. So one of the consequences of having a statistical model is those models are heavily local condition dependent. So for example, if I'm working on a project in Austin and I'm looking at the safety model, then although there are the same safety performance function we apply throughout the Texas, but at a deeper level, if we work on the same safety issues in Dallas, then the safety performance functions can be different if we go and redevelop the models. So for that particular reason, Several of the tools that are developed at federal level are generally modified by state DOTs and can be further modified at district level to suit the local conditions, which we have discussed in greater detail in chapter 4 of our book and video series. So that's why there are state level tools, there are federal level tools of the same name. So there is a federal spice and there are different DOTs, they have their own spice tools. Highway Safety Manual, this is from ASTO and there is only one. Highway Safety Manual for rural multi-lane, this is a spreadsheet by FSWA and we have discussed about this while we are discussing the scoping tool. So HSM for urban or suburban arterial, this is a spreadsheet to do the predictive analysis. This is also a spreadsheet. Now the next one is enhanced ICT manual, which is also available and used for freeways, which like we discussed, which is heavily used because of its simplicity, and because of its simplicity it's easy to use and there aren't too many inputs. Then we have highway safety software, which we as of now we can do many things which other software do, but as of now we typically use it for analyzing the individual elements, for example the roadway design deviations. And IHSTM is currently used and in future is going to be more and more used for the safety analysis and especially for predictive analysis for alternatives. So IHSTM, which we have discussed in greater detail in chapter 4 of book, is going to be the to-go tool as of now for the future predictive analysis, and is kind of preferred by FSWA and TxDOT to perform the predictive analysis. There are many paid and unpaid webinars to see how to use IHSTM. Those are available online, and some great resources provided by NHI, National Highway Institute, and there are several webinars by ASTO as well. Scope of work. Next we have scope of work. The scope of work is an agreement on the work to be performed for a project. The basic scope of the work is defined by type of project, whether it's a new roadway, added capacity. Like I mentioned, added capacity is the most common schematic work we do, and in combination with planning studies. So planning studies, which are divided into 3 kind of studies: corridor studies, here, then we have route studies, and we have feasibility studies. And then toll feasibility studies, which are TNR studies as specified in the scoping form. Preventive maintenance, PM projects, and resurface or restoration, which are 2R projects, typically do not involve traffic analysis. Sometimes they do involve the safety analysis. But hardly traffic analysis. Resurfacing, restoration, and rehabilitation project may involve traffic analysis, especially if roadway geometrics are changed. Reconstruction, 4R projects typically involve traffic analysis. The level of details depend on the project scope. It is recommended that a description of scope of work to be included and answer questions such as: what is the purpose of project? What are the project goals and objectives? What issues will the project address? What are the project milestones, and what are the deliverables? So these are some of the major considerations that we need to remember while we are deciding the scope of work. The next one is geographic limit, also commonly known as project limit. So there are several guidelines on how to define the project limits. Typically for schematic projects, let's say this is the roadway and we have the project limits from here to here. For traffic and operation analysis, we typically start one interchange up and down, and typically if there are no interchange, then 1 mile beyond the typical schematic projects. And on the cross street we go up to half mile unless we find a signal. So on the cross streets we look for the nearby signal, and that's the end of our project limits. So project limits needs to be defined based on the guidelines that are provided in IIJRs if we are working on interstate projects, or if we are not working on IIJR projects, then in coordination with TxDOT TxDOT PM. Special limit for operation and safety analysis are typically the same. For the special limit, it is recommended to attach a map to the scoping form. For an example of special limit, please see figure 1 and 1. So we will quickly look at the figure. So the recommendation to provide a special limit or the project map is like this. So we have the main lanes, we have frontage roads, and we have the cross streets with the intersections. So these red dots represent study intersections that are signalized, and the blue triangles are study intersections that are unsignalized. As I mentioned, this project limit starts from here to here. However, for the traffic operation purposes, we go a little bit beyond the project limit. So for our traffic operation purposes, our limits are from this line to this line. So moving back, below are some sample prompts that may provide the guidance for the special limits. What is the overall project location? What intersection or interchanges, segments, or other facilities that are to be included in the analysis? Or is this an IIJR, which is Interstate Access Justification Report, that requires the upstream and downstream interchange to be included? So in majority of the IIJRs, our project limit requires upstream and downstream interchange included, except for rural areas. So in rural areas, several times let's say this is our project limit, and we may not have the nearby interchange for, let's say, 15 miles. So we do not go until we find the next interchange for rural interstates. If we can have a look whether the next interchange will have significant impact on the project, and if we feel that is the next interchange, in majority of cases we do go up to the next interchange. However, for rural interstate, we have to see where the next interchange lies, and if it lies pretty far away, then we can end our project limit, let's say 1 to 2 miles from the end of the schematic. So either we go to the nearest interchange, or if the nearest interchange is very far away, especially for the rural interstates, then we can end it from 1 or 2 miles after where the project schematic is done. So for freeways, it is recommended that the main lane and frontage road to be considered. On the next page, we have the project limit, and sometimes in some of the projects, some consultant prefer to provide this on different sheets. However, this guideline, some consultant may provide it on different pages, but it's better to just provide this looks like a GIS map of the corridor and the entire corridor on one single sheet. So if we can do it in other platform is good. It seems like this is done in GIS, so one GIS map, I would say, of project on single page. Next one is analysis year and peak periods. So the time limit for operational analysis include analysis years, which typically are for analysis year. We typically do analysis for existing year, then we do opening year, then we look at design year. For the forecasting purposes, we go 10 years beyond the design year called pavement year. However, we do not do traffic or safety analysis for pavement years. Several times we do forecast the traffic volume for the pavement year. In between opening and design year, there is a interim year. So in between opening and design year, some of the project includes interim year as well, but not all of them. A majority of projects do not include interim year, but I would say it's 50-50. So existing year analysis represents the current conditions and is typically completed using the data less than 3 years old. For IIJR, it is a requirement that data collection should not be older than 3 years from the approval. So data collection plus 3 years should not exceed IIJR approval date. In this direction. So data collection plus 3. IIJR approval date should not exceed the data collection plus 3 years. So generally we try to collect data and finish the traffic operation project within 3 years and get the approval, and this is a requirement for IIJR, for the IIJR approval to happen within 3 years of data collection. Opening year. The opening year is the first year in which the proposed improvements are expected to be open. So opening year, like I mentioned, is a let year plus construction year generally. So let year is in which the project is let for bidding, and then plus construction. That defines our opening year. Opening year is the first year when the facility is open to the public. The opening year is typically determined by project size, complexity, schedule, and with respect to letting date. The let date is defined as the official receipt and opening of biddings and the determination of apparent low bidder. It is dependent on planning and programming of the project. So let year is usually known. However, construction year or number of years needed for construction kind of changes sometimes. So at the beginning of project, we gather this information on our estimated opening year. The opening year plus 20 years, like I mentioned, gives us design year, and design year plus 10 years gives us pavement year. For example, if our let date, we discussed this in the scoping form, if our let date is in 2032 and our estimated years of construction is 3 years, then our opening year will be 2035. This is our opening year. Our design year will be 2035 plus 20, which is 2045, and our pavement year will be design year plus 10, so 2055. Next one is interim year, and interim year is the opening year of different phases of the project after first phase. Interim year are sometimes used if the proposed improvements show failing a level of service prior to design year. Design year. Projects are planned. So a word on interim year which is mentioned here is interim year is generally used for the first reason which is mentioned here. If the proposed improvements if there are different phases of the project for the first phase, so several times the construction occurs in different phases, and if we have different phases of construction, then we may be interested in having an interim year. The analysis next one is design year. Design year is the project planned year for which we are planning the roadway. So design year is the year for which we are trying to have the capacity and safety improvements. So we typically try to have the roadway capacity such that it can work with an acceptable level of service, roadway capacity such that in the design year it can provide an acceptable level of service. So so for schematic and other projects, we try to come up with roadway design and roadway improvements such that during design year we have an acceptable level of service. We have discussed all these concepts in chapter 2, fundamentals of traffic operations, in our video series. Please have a look if you want to more clarification on these concepts. The analysis year listed above are typical but can vary based on projects. For example, resurfacing, restoration and rehabilitation projects often have analysis year of only 5 to 10 years. Pavement year is used for traffic projection but not needed for traffic analysis, like I mentioned. It is typically 10 years after the design year and represents the useful life of the pavement. The analysis year is the time of the day when the analysis will be conducted. The analysis period is the time of the day when the analysis will be conducted. So typically analysis period in terms of travel demand model, the word period is used and not peak hour. So in our video series we have seen the difference between what is the difference between peak hour and peak period. To get in more depth about what does these terms mean, AM peak, PM peak, 24-hour traffic, please refer to chapter 2 of our video series, which goes into fundamentals of traffic operations. And then the next paragraph discusses the AM and PM peak, which we have discussed in great detail in our chapter. So typically traffic analysis includes an AM peak, PM peak. These are situations that warrants the analysis period, such that if the analysis of a facility is near a school, mall or sports arena, the analysis of facility with weekend traffic. So several times apart from typical weekday AM and PM peak analysis, we can look at weekend traffic. Sometimes the weekend traffic is higher, especially if they are located near sports arena. One good example of not using typical weekday is airports. So there are some airport projects I have worked on where we do not use AM and PM peak from the typical weekday. We collect 7 days of data, and usually Friday evening is the peak, which is higher than all the peaks. Temporal limits for historic safety analysis includes the most recent 3 to 5 years of data. Typically 5 years 3 years should only be used under certain circumstances. In majority of projects we are looking to use recent 5 years of data. So recent 5 years of data for safety analysis. Temporal limit for a predictive analysis typically includes an opening year and the design year. So similar to traffic operations, the predictive analysis is done for existing, then is done for opening year, and then is done for design year. Exactly same as traffic operations. For projects that need FSWA approval, which are typically interstate projects or the one which require IIJRs, interstate projects that requires IIJR approvals, it is suggested that crash data is obtained through CRIS website help desk or TxDOT Traffic Safety Division. So we have already looked into Chris' website and how to obtain and process the safety data. Please refer to chapter 4 of video series if we want to learn more about the safety analysis and how to obtain the data and how to use this data. The next one are background factor and project schedule. It is suggested that the background factor which may influence the projects are included in the scoping form. These background factors may include planned roadway improvements. We have discussed about how to gather the planned roadway improvements in the area information. So planned roadway improvements. Now there can be two type of planned roadway improvement. One is the part of project which we are working on, and another one is part of other projects in the study area or the nearby the study area. It does not necessarily needs to be within the study area. So we have looked in one of our chapters, in chapter 3, that our traffic study area is, let's say this is our traffic study area, then our traffic forecasting study area is much larger. So when we are looking for planned roadway projects or all the other elements, we look at a larger area than the study area. So if this is our corridor, this one is our project limit, then we go a little bit beyond for traffic analysis, and for forecasting we go a little bit bigger. These discussions are covered in chapter 3 of the video series. Please refer to those video series to learn more about the planned roadway projects and other kind of factors that influence our traffic volume forecasting. Planned developments, which are typically, so planned roadway projects, some of the good sources is TxDOT Project Tracker, TxDOT Project Tracker website. Then another good source is travel demand models. Another good source is MPO plans and local plans. The next one is plan development. Plan development, some good sources are, usually we request all the traffic impact analysis near our study area for a project, MPOs plan, local city plans, and travel demand models. We have discussed in length on how to use this data to come up to be used in traffic operations. So please refer to chapter 3 of the video series that goes in greater detail of how to use this databases and how to conduct the traffic volume forecasting using everything. It is recommended that a preliminary project schedule be attached to the scoping form. Usually the schedule is not set and schedule kind of changes during the project, but a preliminary schedule can be attached with, is recommended to be attached with the scoping form. So preliminary project schedule or initial project schedule. However, in majority of projects, the schedule kind of changes based on different challenges that we face during the projects. The project schedule establishes the start and completion date of the project and includes major project milestones such as project administration, data collection, traffic analysis, safety analysis, agency coordination, and all other factors that are typically included in project schedules. Next, we have analysis methodology. This is the core of TSAP manual, which discusses what tools we need to use and what methodology we need to use. So the preliminary analysis methodology consists of 5 categories: data collection, then alternative identification, analysis tool consideration, selection, analysis tool consideration and selection, MOE selection, and traffic forecasting. So information of all these is provided next. This is the form we looked at, which kind of goes through analysis methodology. we have looked through this form in detail. Here are the sources of existing data, field data collections. We will not go through this again. Please refer to previous video to look at each individual element of this in this form. Data collection and review. Gathering available data from existing sources. One of the very good source is statewide traffic analysis reporting system, which gives us historical count, historical ADT up to past 20 years. Then at several locations it gives us 24-hour counts in 15 minutes interval. Then it gives us K factor, D factor, T factor, also the vehicle class information at certain location. The one thing that TxDOT does not give us is the turning moment count, which I wish they would give. Turning moment count. We have looked through the TxDOT website, how to use it and what are the features of TxDOT website in one of our videos. So please refer to our traffic volume forecasting video to look more into what TxDOT provides. Then we have the NPM RDS. NPM RDS is similar to NRIX. NPM RDS, I think is the full form is National Performance Measure something. NPM RDS is a national database which can give travel time, travel speed. So travel time, travel speed, congestion. For major corridors, and it is, I believe, is by University of Maryland. University of Maryland. We have used NPM RDS on several of our projects, and the usage is similar to what TxDOT has contract with NRIX. So TxDOT has a contract with NRIX, which provides similar information, and NRIX can provide other information as well. So NRIX is kind of a little bit confusing. There are some elements that are provided through TxDOT contracts which are free, which is travel time, bottleneck. However, we have to sign the user agreement and whatnot, bottlenecks and congestions. However, NRIX also has TMC estimation and OD estimation and other features, but those are not under contract, and we have to work on contract by contract basis to get those data. NRIX is here. Origin destination data. So origin destination data we can get from the GPS based data or Bluetooth surveys. One good source of origin destination data used to be street light. I wouldn't say good source, but it was available through TxDOT. The data was kind of, in our personal experience, was not that reliable to estimate the counts, because the data was based on a sample data of 4% to 6%, and then there was a lot of algorithms and massaging to get the actual data. So but nonetheless, there was an option to get the street light. However, recently the street light has been replaced by 3 new data sources. First one is NRIX, which was already there, but NRIX also has the OD feature, which I believe is not available within the TxDOT contract. Then the second one is Replica, which provides bigger zone to bigger zone OD's information. I still have to see how good this will be for a corridor study, because based on our experience of using Replica, it's it provides the volume information from bigger zones to bigger zones. There is an option to purchase the volume information at a roadway level, but that's not available through TxDOT. We have to kind of purchase it, or we have to use the project money. And then last one is VIJO. VIJO is GPS based data, I believe is unprocessed data, is a little bit limited in practical sense that it requires heavy processing, and we typically do not have time and budget to actually look and dig through this data. So I would say VIJO and replica are still kind of new and have limited use. Also, their use needs to be verified by independent research agencies such as TTI before it can be used, because in our previous experience, it's our personal experience that some of these data sources were not that reliable. They only capture, let's say, 1 to 5% of the sample, which may not be good enough. Next one is determining the safety analysis and operational analysis need, and creating a field data collection plan to specify location and type of the data that will be conducted. So in majority of projects, we do create a field data collection plan. It's kind of nothing new. We have been doing it for past 20 years. So before collecting a data, we create a field data collection plan. Determining the safety analysis and operational analysis needs. These are all the data needs which we are considering. So to summarize, data review process will be used to determine the existing data availability, of which for most of the project existing data uses STARS2 statewide planning map, crash record information system by TxDOT. These are the most commonly used platforms and NREDs for travel time data. To determine additional data sources that will be needed for project. So one data sources we typically collect is the turning moment count, which is hard to get from existing data sources. So we end up collecting them. So turning moment counts. We have looked into turning moment count and turning moment volume estimation under chapter 3 of the previous video series. So maybe if you are interested in knowing the difference between turning moment count and how it is used to forecast the future turning moment volumes, please refer to that video. Future turning moment volumes. The data collection plan will be in map format and specify the type of data that is collected and location of all necessary data collections, like we saw in the previous picture, the corridor picture, which is here. So here we have the locations by red dot and a blue triangle and a line on the location of data collection. These are the special limits. I guess this one. So in this one we have this, let me get a marker, this signalized intersection data, unsignalized intersection data, and travel time data in this orange by floating car method, and 24-hour tube counts. Here this we usually collect it by vehicle class, and most of the time by lane if we are working it on micro simulation. So vehicle class by lane, and we collect volume by lane, and every 15 minutes. So these are 24-hour tube counts. Also, one thing that seems to be missing here is ramp volume. So every ramp we have the at least 24 hours. It's usually greater than 24 hours, but at least we have all the ramp data collection within the ramps, which is not shown here. The next one is alternative identification. The alternative identification is the process of considering multiple alternatives that use different configuration to accomplish the same goal. After alternatives are selected, they are analyzed, their results are compared to determine which option is the best option. While the outcome of alternatives are not known before the analysis begin, this is not true. Many times, if you are experienced enough and if you are familiar with highway capacity manual well enough, and if you have good sense of service volume table and how the critical lane volume works, majority of time, once given the alternatives, we do have an idea on how the alternative is gonna turn out, but not to the refined level, but we typically do have an idea on which alternative is gonna work. If you are experienced enough, if you are smart enough, it's not that difficult. So for intersection, there is something called critical lane volume, which can give a pretty good estimate on how that alternative is gonna turn out and which innovative intersections are gonna be good. And then for other one, there are service volume tables, and then if we are familiar with queue and congestion theory at a macro level, then we can estimate how the traffic is going to flow if there is congestion build-up during certain hours of the day. So we kind of is depending on the complexity, majority of time we do have an idea of what the result is going to turn out, not to the precise number, but at least we have a good estimate of level of service even before we work on the project. Preliminary alternative identification is critical because it leads to effective utilization of limited resources. That's a good point. So it's good to get the preliminary alternatives identified, so we can use our time and budget, so we are not creating more and more alternatives during the project. Alternatives to be analyzed needs to be listed on scoping form. Analysis, tool consideration, and measure of effectiveness. So there are a lot of chapters that we will look through that will help us to consider which tools should we use and what measure of effectiveness should we use. So throughout this manual, there are, depending on type of project we are doing and depending on what we are trying to achieve, we will be using different tools and measure of effectiveness. So there is not like a single, these things needs an entire chapter for itself, which are covered under different chapters. The next one is traffic volume forecasting. So traffic volume forecasting involves determining who will develop the traffic volume forecast. So at the scoping level, we just want to know who will develop the traffic volume forecast, who will approve it, what the procedure will be, and all those things. So there are three options to develop traffic volume forecast. It's called option A, option B, option C, like we have discussed. Option B is most frequently used, where forecast is done by consultant and approval is done by TxDOT TPP division. In option C, the forecast is done by consultants and the approval is done by TxDOT PM or district. TxDOT district or division. So district or division. In option A, the forecast is developed by TPP and there is no approval needed. So sometimes we go for option A. These are three different options within the TxDOT framework. Like I mentioned, in option B, consultant will develop the forecast and send it to TxDOT PM. TxDOT PM would send it to TxDOT TPP division for approval. And for option C, consultant would send it to TxDOT PM and they would internally approve it. And option A, we would give the TPP division, we will provide them with the schematic and the line schematic, or at least the future lane configuration, and they would give us they would do the forecast internally and give us the final number to be used for projects. So option B, consultants are taking more, is depending on responsibility. In option C, consultants are taking more responsibility than option B, than option A. Depending on who is developing and approving the forecasts, selecting the forecasting methodology may be necessary. If project lies within an MPO with travel demand model, then analysts can consider using the MPO's travel demand models. We will discuss about how to use the travel demand model, what travel demand models are available. So typically we have MPO's travel demand models, and outside of MPO we have statewide travel demand model called SAM, which is created and maintained by TTI, Texas Transportation Institute. If the project is outside the MPO boundaries with travel demand model, then analysts can consider using the TxDOT statewide analysis model SAM output. We have discussed in great length on the limitations of using travel demand models, such as dealing with poor and inconsistent results. Calibration and validation of travel demand models. So if we want to learn more about travel demand model, please refer to chapter 3 of the video series, which is outside of this manual which we have created. And the next and the last is the document the traffic forecasting assumption on scoping form. Include the information about which MPO travel demand model will be used, where historic volume will be taken to obtain a historic growth rate, and what are the planned land use were used to develop the growth pattern for traffic forecast. So include the information about which MPO travel demand model will be used, historic volumes, from where we will get the historic volume, typically from STARS2 or statewide planning map. And STARS2. And what are the planned land use that were used to develop for traffic growth patterns for forecasting. So for this one, like I mentioned, we typically have traffic impact analysis studies, and typically we get these growth patterns from either city or MPO land development plans, or the third source is travel demand model. For additional guidance on volume and forecasting, refer to TxDOT TPP corridor analysis SOP. Coordinate with TxDOT project manager. So this SOP is kind of little bit limited, and we have discussed some key elements from the SOP and some of the better way of doing forecasting, which are related to travel demand modeling. So with that, we have covered chapter 1 as project scoping. I hope we gave a little bit of review and a little bit of clarity on what are the elements that are included in project scoping. Further chapters include more details about which tools we need to use, and some details about how to use those tools, what parameters to use. The guidance does not give an exact guidance on, let's say, which parameters needs to be set what. It just kind of gives guidance on which tools needs to be used under what conditions, and some generic guidance. So majority of guidance in this TxDOT TSAP manual is kind of derived from federal guidance and several DOT's guidance, and it is not working as it does not provide like a technical reference to how to use Synchro or how to use Visim or how to do travel demand modeling. For those, we have a different series where we can learn how to use these things and how to actually perform the work. The guidance simply says follow this criteria to perform the work. Let's say between Visim and CoreSim, follow this procedure to do these analysis, how to select the tools and how to apply them. So we will continue our discussion in further videos where we'll discuss more in depth of what is needed on the individual technical elements, which are planning studies, travel demand modeling, safety analysis, and traffic operations. Thank you so much.